So welcome. This is the webinar for Aldo Leopold in the Southwest, which is a tool that the Arizona Game and Fish Department created to bring Aldo Leopold and his work into your classroom. It's originally designed sort of for high school classrooms, but there could be applications at other levels as well, although some of the stuff can get a little complex. First of all, let me start with the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Hopefully, if you're here, you sort of already know what the Arizona Game and Fish Department is, but we are the state government agency that is responsible for managing Arizona's wildlife. So we deal with all of those animals that you would see in the wild when you're outside, whether they be birds or mammals or reptiles or fish. Those are amphibians. Those are kind of the general classes that we deal with. As I mentioned, we are a government agency. We are a state government agency, so we are different than the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That is a federal agency, and then we are the state sort of on the ground managing the wildlife within the borders of Arizona. We are different than most government agencies, however, because we don't take general taxpayer dollars. So there's nothing from your income tax that comes from us. There's nothing from a sales tax that comes from us. We are operated on what we call more of a user pay model. So it is the people that are using the resource, in this case the resource is wildlife, that are essentially paying for it. So right now that is hunters and anglers, or people that fish. You buy a hunting license, you buy a fishing license, you buy hunting or fishing equipment. Money from the sale of those items comes back to the department for on-the-ground conservation and management work, education programs, all those different types of things. So those are right now are primarily the people that are paying for what we do. In addition, my salary and all the program stuff that I do comes from the Heritage Fund. Now, the Heritage Fund was passed by the voters in the 90s, and what it did was it takes a certain amount of money from the proceeds, the profits of the state lottery system, and puts them towards preserving Arizona's heritage. In this case, it was originally divided up to go, some of it to go towards the state parks and some of it to go towards game and fish. And with game and fish is only allocated a maximum of $10 million. And then that is spread out over stuff like our endangered species work, and it's also comes to environmental education, which is the program that I essentially work for. And then my name is Eric Proctor. I am the wildlife education coordinator for the department. In that role, I work primarily behind the scenes, so I work with you guys, teachers. A big chunk of what I do is professional development, so I work on trainings and workshops and webinars and these types of things to help you bring wildlife into the classroom. And the other piece that I do is I work on curriculum development as well. So I give you lesson ideas and activities that you can also bring into the classroom. I've been in that position for over 11 years now. And prior to that, I was a middle school science and social studies teacher. I taught in both the Kyrene district and in the Littleton School District over in Avondale. And I've done a number of other science education, informal science education work. So I've worked at the Phoenix Zoo, I've worked at the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum, I've worked at the Challenger Space Center, all doing science education type stuff. So that's sort of where we're coming from in my background. So let's go ahead and talk about Aldo Leopold. Before we can show you the story map, we have to introduce you or make sure that everyone here is familiar with Aldo Leopold. On your screen, you're going to see a poll with a very simple question is how familiar are you with Aldo Leopold? And there are four choices. What I want you to do is select the one that best describes your familiarity with Leopold. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it then. And what I'm going to do is share it so that you can see the poll. And you can see that for the vast majority of you, about 3/4 of you are either somewhat familiar or you haven't heard of him at all. So we're going to do a very quick overview of who Aldo Leopold is and what his role is in regards to wildlife management and why an organization like Game and Fish cares about him. A couple of you are pretty familiar with Aldo Leopold, and nobody's willing to go out on a limb and say they're an expert. And that's cool. That's okay. So let me go ahead and hide this poll, and we'll bring up our work with Leopold. So first and foremost, if you were to look at his Wikipedia page, or you look at any of the different sort of resources available that talk about Aldo Leopold, they're going to show you that he's basically the everyman. He did a lot of things throughout his life. He was a conservationist. He was a forester first and foremost, but he ended up becoming an educator. He was a college professor. He's a well-known writer. He was a hunter. But overall, he was an outdoor enthusiast. He loved the outdoors. He had a passion for the outdoors, and he was interested in conserving it, particularly our wildlife resources. Okay. He was in one of the first classes that graduated from the Yale School of Forestry, not for the Yale School of Forestry. A little bit of a mistake on my PowerPoint there, but he graduated from the Yale School of Forestry in the early 1900s. He hopped on a train and headed out west, and his first job straight out of forestry school was in the newly established Apache Forest in 1909, so almost on the border of New Mexico. That's where he started his career. And what we're going to show you and what you'll see through some of this stuff, we won't get into a ton of details, but we are making the argument that his time here in Arizona and New Mexico, his time in the Southwest, was what shaped his ideas and would eventually help him become the father of wildlife management, which is what he is considered by people in our field today. He is the one who started it all. He is basically the creator of science-based wildlife management. He gave us some of our scientific studies and tools and techniques that we still use today. Prior to that, we didn't use a lot of science. It was a lot of guesswork that went into wildlife management. He sort of turned it into a science. He became the first professor of wildlife management at the University of Wisconsin. He wrote the first real textbook on it called Game Management, and his textbook was still being used pretty regularly up until probably 10 or 15 years ago. Now there's some other books that have expanded on his ideas, but he's still basically considered the creator of this entire field. And he is probably, from a general audience perspective, he is most known for a book that he wrote called the Sand County Almanac. And I guarantee if you walk into any bookstore, whether it's a Barnes & Noble or whatever bookstores are still around anymore, and you go to like their nature section or their conservation section or even their science section over there, you will probably find a copy of this book on the shelves. Okay? It's easy to acquire off of Amazon or any of those booksellers. You can get it. It's still in print. The book was published after his death. It was published shortly after his death, but he was working on it up until he died. And it is basically a collection of essays. Yes, he was a very, very good scientist, but he also knew how to communicate science well, and he could communicate it to just about any audience, and he was really good at writing to a general audience. And I'm highly encouraging teachers to look at Sand County Almanac and see how you can bring that into your classroom, particularly at the high school level. His writing is phenomenal from a science standpoint, from a natural history standpoint, but also from a literary standpoint. And I think if you were to introduce English teachers to Sand County Almanac, they would be impressed by what they read as well. His language, his prose, the way he writes is just so phenomenal. His use of the language, the similes and metaphors he uses, the alliteration he uses, all these things that a lot of your English teachers are going to be teaching anyway, they can do it with this book. So this provides a great opportunity for you to link the science and the language arts pieces together. So I highly encourage you, even if you just go to the library and pick up a Sand County Almanac and read it, you won't be disappointed. But if you are looking for more information, there's a number of organizations out there that are there to promote Aldo Leopold, one of which is the Aldo Leopold Foundation, and you can find that at aldoleopold.org, and they have a lot of educational materials on their website. So let's take a little look at an excerpt. This is from an essay inside a Sand County Almanac called Thinking Like a Mountain, and this is just the first 2 paragraphs. What I want you to do is just read it to yourself, and then in the questions box, if you'll just sort of write your thoughts, what do you think this essay is about based on this, and then how do you feel? What are your thoughts on just this small little passage? So spend just a couple minutes doing that, reading it, and then responding to your thoughts on this. So again, once you've had a chance to read it, go ahead and tell me what you think this essay was going to be about. Again, this is just the first 2 paragraphs of the essay, and then sort of your thoughts. As you read this, what are you thinking? What do you think about his style, his language, all that type of stuff? Christine mentions that it seems very poetic. Stephanie, he's really colorful with his words. When he describes something that others may seem dull or boring, he brings life to it. Everything in nature has a different perspective, is what Tiffany is writing, what she thinks this essay is about. Only the non-living things can be objective. All right, so this essay is called Thinking Like a Mountain. And that's sort of referenced in the last sentence of the second paragraph there. Only the mountain has lived long enough to listen objectively to the howl of the wolf. And that sentence really is what this essay becomes about. It is about a wolf. And that's where you start hearing about, to the deer, it's a reminder of the way of all flesh. So that, a deer, when he hears the wolf's howl, he knows what that means. When the pines hear the wolf's howl, they know what that means. When the coyote hears the wolf's howl, they know they're going to eat because they're going to get the gleanings of the kill. Cowmen, the threat of red ink at the bank, there's a chance that they might be losing some cattle as a result of that. Talks about all these things that the howl of a wolf represents. But the essay then goes on to talk about how his feelings about wolves, and more specifically, and actually more generally, how his feeling about predators changed. Working in Arizona in 1909, the policy of the U.S. government at the time was to eliminate predators. We were in the middle of a predator eradication program. We believed that if predators were gone from the landscape, then that was going to be better for cattle. It was going to be better for the settlers who were settling the West, and overall better for the country. And so the idea was, let's eliminate mountain lions, let's eliminate bears, let's eliminate wolves, let's eliminate coyotes, all these sort of big, charismatic predators. It was time to get rid of them. So he's talking about how that was commonplace in this essay, and that they go around, he describes killing a wolf. And he has a very famous line there where he approached the wolf after he had shot it, and he approached the wolf to sort of end it, and he watched the green fire in the eyes die. And at that moment, he started to think that maybe this wasn't the right thing to be doing. Now, it should be noted that he wasn't against hunting, and he continued to hunt the rest of his life. But this idea of controlling predators or eliminating predators, he felt at that point was probably wrong. And then the essay goes on then to talk about the role that predators play in the ecosystem. And so it talks about how they keep the deer population in check. And actually a mountain is better for having wolves than it would be if the wolves weren't there, because a deer, he has this really descriptive language at the end of the essay where he talks about how a deer can tear down a mountain in a matter of years because of the overpopulation that would occur and would destroy the ecosystem. And it's a really fascinating essay. So it really goes into carrying capacity and talking about why the role that predators have and the importance they have in the ecosystem. And it's a fascinating article, and there's been speculation, and this comes into what we're going to be talking about with his time in the Southwest, that whether or not this was an actual event that occurred. Was he taking poetic license, for lack of a better term, and making up an experience so that he could tell a story, or was it an actual experience? And so scientists have been trying to go back and search through his notes and figure out if this was an actual event. And they're pretty sure that there was a situation where he killed a wolf. It may not have changed him instantaneously. I'm not sure anybody really says that, oh, he shot this wolf and then changed instantaneously. But thinking back on this particular event over 20 or 30 years when he actually wrote the essay, there's some belief that that event in and of itself might have been the thing, might not have changed everything. It was probably his experiences through life that changed it, but that this event of this wolf that he's talking about may have been real. And they take descriptions from this essay, they take notes that he had in some of his journals, and a lot of other things, and they piece it together. The cool thing about it is that this event likely took place in Arizona. But I just wanted to introduce this as just a very simple example of some of the texts that you'll read. And again, I highly encourage you to check out Sand County Almanac. You will not be disappointed in what you read from him. So let's start talking about this tool a little bit. But before I get into the specifics of the tool, I want to tell you about the platform that this tool was built on. This Aldo Leopold in the Southwest tool that I'm going to be sharing with you, it was built in what's called a story map. Now, story map probably gives you all sorts of different visions of what it could be, but there is a very specific, this is basically a copyrighted or a trademarked thing from an organization called Esri. Esri is the leader in GIS technology worldwide. They're centered out of Redlands, California, and they do GIS work. If you're not familiar with GIS, just a very quick, it means Geographic Information System. So anything that you can map and put it digitally map is basically what GIS is. So you have interacted with GIS even if you didn't know what it was. If you've ever used Google Earth, that's a form of GIS. If you've ever used MapQuest, same thing. That is a type of GIS. Pizza delivery people are probably using GIS. Your police stations are using GIS. It's how they can figure out where they're going to go. So we're right in the middle of an election season, and if you watch primary results, or as you watch the election results come in November, and you watch places like CNN or MSNBC or Fox News when they're running their coverage of it, and they have these big maps on TV screens behind them, and they're touching certain areas, and they can zoom into a very specific legislative precinct, and they can determine that it went one way or it went another way. That's all based off of GIS. Basically, it's taking anything that you can geographically pinpoint, a data point, a location, and then tying a bunch of information to it. So for example, if I was going to map my house and I was going to put my address, that is a geographic location, but tied in with that geographic location, I can embed information. So I can embed that there is a male and female parent that live there, and then there are two kids that live there, that they work at these locations, that they might vote this way, that they were born on this particular year. All that information can be tied in with that location, and then you can sort based on those things. So if you were looking at, okay, where were people that were born in the 70s, where are they most likely located? If you've tied that birth year information into a location, you can now sift it, and it makes these maps very, very visual and very, very powerful. That's GIS technology, and Esri is the leader in that. If you have not exposed your kids to GIS, I highly encourage you to do so, and it's getting easier thanks to Esri and a lot of the free tools they make available to educators and the public in general. It is a vastly growing field. Outside of the internet, GIS is probably the single greatest technological achievement that we are working on today, and is going to change so much of what we do. It already has. I can't think of a government agency that doesn't use, not only that doesn't use GIS, that probably doesn't have GIS specialists on staff. I know the Game and Fish department that I work for, we have an entire GIS section that works for us, and their whole job is to make maps that we use to study wildlife and all kinds of stuff. We collect data, we map that data so that we can see wildlife movements, wildlife population demographics, all those different types of things. It's a huge growth field, and the great thing is it's relatively easy to get started, and then it can get very, very complex in what you can do with it. But a story map is a type of GIS tool that Esri has created that allows you to combine the maps with text, images, multimedia content, and basically tell a story. They have a very specific website, and we're going to bring up this website in just a minute, that has galleries of story maps that other people have already created. So there are story maps out there that organizations have created, that individuals have created, all available for free. The great thing is they require no special technology other than a computer with internet access. Obviously, the more power you have, I mean, there's tons of data stored behind a lot of these maps. So if you have a slow internet connection, it can be somewhat frustrating at times. But the power is there. And I'm going to show you some examples of these story maps right now. So the website that I just showed you, storymaps.arcgis.com, is what you see on the screen now. Again, I didn't do anything. I just typed in that website. In fact, I Google searched Esri story maps, or if you Google search story maps, you can click on the gallery right here in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and click on the gallery, and we're going to show you just some different story maps. Now, the first ones I'm going to show you are not ones that we created. They're just random ones that I found that I thought were kind of cool, that would illustrate what a story map is very easily. So there's different types, and if you look over here on the left-hand side, you can see I'm scrolling down, and there's different types of story maps. The premise behind a story map is the same, but you can structure them differently depending on the story that you want to tell. Okay, so I'm going to focus on a couple of these. So there is a very, very simple one, a very, very common one. It's called the map tour. So if you were to click on that, they're going to bring up all types of different maps that other people have created that are freely available to you. I have not logged in. I'm not doing anything. In fact, if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, it says sign in. I do have an Esri account that would allow me to create some stuff, and you need an account to create some of the stuff, but I'm not signed in currently. I'm doing all of this by just going to the website. So I'm in Map Tour, and the one that I want to show you that I thought was just kind of funny that I get a kick out of, if we scroll down a little bit, is this one called Santas Around the World. And this will give you an idea of what a tour is. A map tour is basically where you have this map and you want to lead people along a different way. And you kind of want to direct them in the particular thing. So you'll see here, this is sort of the intro page, and you can see it's talking about Santa Claus in the United States. But each of these things down at the bottom is a stop along this tour. And so as I click on them, it takes me to that location. You can see the map change. It shows me a picture. Now we're talking about who Santa Claus is in Turkey, and it's giving me some of that information. If I click on number 3, it's going to move over there. Now the thing to understand about this is this person who created this has directed me to these different stops, but I don't necessarily have to do this. What you need to understand is this is a live map. I can actually move this map all around. All I'm doing is dragging it around just like we would on a Google Earth or anything like that. I can zoom in, I can zoom out. I can do whatever I want with this map. It is a live map. Now they've controlled some of the stuff on the map. I can't do everything with it, but you can see that it's live. I can do whatever I want. And then if I go back and click on one of these, it'll now take me directly to that spot. Okay? And moves me through the map doing that. Now, if I don't want to follow along on the bottom, I can also just click on numbers. So I want to go to number 12 here. It'll automatically move me to number 12. Okay. So this is a very simple version, but what you'll see here is it allowed me in most cases, this person included a picture, and then they were able to do a caption for that picture, but in this case it's actually a video that they've embedded in as well. You're limited on your text on this one, but it serves a very specific purpose. So that's one example of a map tour that I wanted to show you. I'm going to go ahead and clear out of that one, and I'm going to choose a different type of map now. What we're going to do now, I'm going to go back up to the top so we can see the different map options we have. That was a map tour we just did. What I'm going to do now is these ones called Swipe and Spyglass. So again, I'm not going to go through all these different types, but I'm just showing you some different ones. One of these that I think is really cool. So Swipe and Spyglass talks about how you interact. It basically overlaps 2 maps on top of each other and allows you to engage in those 2 maps at the same time. So one of these I'm going to show you is this one called Kathmandu before and after the earthquake. So if I was to click on this, again, still completely free. I haven't done anything to get to this. It's going to take a little bit of time to bring it up, but now what it's done is it has me 5 locations, and you can see this up in the top part of the screen here. It shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In this case, it's showing me the Dharahara Tower, which I believe is this thing right in the middle. And then it has a swipe bar. This is a case of a swipe map. Okay, and I can move this bar back and forth. And what you'll see is it's basically put these 2 maps on top of each other, and then it's showing me one map at a time. Okay, the map on the left is what this city at this location looked like before this major earthquake that happened in April 2015. The map on the right, which is underneath, shows me what it looked like after the earthquake. And they've completely moved them over each other, and I can just move this, and you can see, look at that tower in the middle as I move across, and you can see the damage that occurs. Okay. If I'm to look at some other areas, I can click on a different part of the city. This moves me slightly out a little bit. I really like this one because you can see before, and then you can see after, and look at all the tents and stuff that gets established on the field as it moves there. You can just see this mass of people and tents and all these colored objects that again are tents that basically they've had to move to because their houses got destroyed. Again, what it looks like without the tents and what it looks like once the tents are there after the earthquake happened. It's just very, very fascinating. This is an example of a swipe story map. And then I want to show you a spyglass. A spyglass is the same concept as a swipe, but you're focusing on a very specific area. Instead of swiping up and down or left and right, this overlays 2 maps. In this case, the map on the top is a historic map of Washington, D.C. that was drawn in 1851. And then this thing in the middle that I can, again, move around is what Washington, D.C. looks like today. And it's been overlaid perfectly on top. So you can see if I take this road that says Maryland, that comes Maryland Avenue, that cuts in, and then it crosses with Virginia, and I move this right over, you can see where that Maryland road is, and it continues up and eventually intersects with Virginia, and you can sort of see how it's changed today. There's the Capitol building right there. And so it's just a different look at it. Now again, this is still a live map. If I want to zoom out, I can zoom out. If I want to pull this map to a different location, I can do that. Still a live map, okay? But these have been put on there so that you can deliver this information. That's just another example of a type of story map. But the one that I'm going to show you and what we're going to get to now is the one that we created on Aldo Leopold and his time in the Southwest. And it's an example of a map journal, which is one of these types. And I think map journals are really powerful if you have a longer story to tell. It provides a lot more ability to include more text. And so it really gives you an opportunity to incorporate language arts. Okay, so we're going to bring this in, and this is the story map. And I'm going to show you how to get there in just a second. I'm going to show you the website. You can see it on the screen, but it's really complicated because, again, it's just being built on the Esri server. I don't need special software for this. I created this on the Esri server. It's put onto their server and stored on their server when I have an account logged in. So this is the cover page of Aldo Leopold in the Southwest. And the way this works is you have the left-hand column, which is all your text and your descriptions. Okay, this is the stuff that you would have the students be reading, and you could actually assign different parts, and you'll see this on the right hand side where the map is. That's called the stage, and that's where I can have different things happen, or the students can direct different things to happen here. So this is a very quick introduction of Aldo Leopold and talking about what it's going to be doing. On the left hand side is my controls on how I can move through the screen. So each of these dots represents a different chapter, so to speak, in this. And so you could assign a different one of these, for example, in your classroom on a different day or a different week and have students work through this. What I want to do is go through the introduction just very quickly. The introduction was my version of giving directions to the students and how this map is set up, because so if they're not familiar with story maps or even GIS, it tells them what to do. And so you'll see here that on the right hand side on the stage there's a map that I created, and the map consists of different layers, and those layers are color coded by different pins. And so on the left-hand side, it explains to them what the blue pins are. Now the colors are wrong a little bit on the screen, and I have to go in and change the text. What's supposed to be orange is actually red, and what's supposed to be yellow is actually orange. It's in there a little bit. But the blue pins are personal and professional events in Leopold's life. So this would be places he was stationed. This would be where he would get married, all those different types of things. The green pins represent locations where he was exploring America's wilderness. He actually created the concept of wilderness, and he was responsible for the first wilderness area that was created was because of Leopold. So the green pin shows some of those key points that led him to this idea of wilderness. The orange pins, or in this case, the red pins, are areas where he was trying to understand protecting our game species. And so these are key parts of where he did game protection associations and things like that. The black pins represent the predator management stuff that I was talking about with the essay Thinking Like a Mountain, where he got exposed to the wolf and his concept of predator management and how that needs to change. The yellow pins are where he was looking at erosion and wildfires. The yellow pins are actually the orange ones on here. And then the purple pins are sort of key wildlife encounters. One of those is the wolf encounter that we talked about from the Thinking Like a Mountain essay. That's where that key piece was. Now, some things about this. This is entirely interactive, right? As I mentioned, it's explained right there on the left-hand side, but they can also click on the legend on the map. And if you click on the legend, it will show what each of those things are. So you can actually see what those are. You can move that. Again, I can move this map if I choose to. Okay, I had it set basically so you're seeing all of them, but you can move it. You can also zoom in if you want to. Again, completely interactive. You can also click on the pins. So when you click on a pin, for example, if I click on this black pin, it's going to give me a little bit of information about that black pin. It tells me a little bit. It shows me a little bit of a picture. If I click on the picture, it will bring up a larger version of that picture. I can still go back. A lot of them have links. So this one is talking about the Kaibab Plateau. And if you've done anything with the Kaibab, you understand there's this really neat biology lesson on the deer of the Kaibab. And actually Leopold is responsible for that lesson. He's the one that sort of introduced us. So I clicked on a link that was provided there, and it gives me some information on the history of the Kaibab deer. I can put anything I want into this when I built this. So I'm controlling what the kids essentially are seeing, but they can interact with it in any way that they want. I can close that up. Some other things that can happen, and you'll see this all in these directions on here. As they're reading through, they're sometimes going to see things that have a dotted line underneath them. So in this case, you can see right here in this paragraph that I highlight, there's a couple things that have a dotted line underneath them. When I click on that, that's going to change what's happening over in the stage. So the dotted line means I'm doing some kind of action that's going to change the stage. So if I click on this one that says a different view of the map, it's going to change what I see. Okay? And if I want to go back, there's a back button. I just click on the back button and it moves me back. I can put whatever I want in there. Again, I've built this map already, so if I want to show a picture, I can do that. I can take the map away. There's Leopold when he was down in Mexico doing some hunting. Then, just like a regular internet site, below that paragraph, there's another one, and you can see that Arizona Game and Fish Department has a solid line underneath it. That's a regular hyperlink. So just like you have an internet website that has hyperlinks on it, this acts just like a hyperlink. So if I click on Arizona Game and Fish Department, what it's going to do is it's going to bring up a separate web page. In this case, it's the web page for the Game and Fish Department. Again, this is all just introducing them to what this map can do. From a teacher's perspective, what I wanted to do was make this useful for you as well. I wanted to give you the tools to bring this in so that it wasn't just a bunch of reading. So I've embedded sort of reflection questions throughout this activity when they're reading in, and you'll see that represented by the red text. Okay, I've highlighted in red text, and I did that for a couple reasons. I didn't want to just put the question into the reading because I also felt that this map might be used by the general public or people that are interested in learning about Aldo Leopold, because he is extremely popular, that they might want to read this and maybe not be bothered by the reflection questions. Or maybe you had your own reflection questions. You didn't like the ones that I included in here. That's perfectly fine. You don't have to have the kids click on it. But if they were to click on it, and you can see here this one that says question 1, if I click on that, because it's a dotted line, it's going to change the stage. And this is an example. This is just a pre-assessment question, very similar to the one that I sort of asked you guys in the poll question. Is before we get started, let's see what you already know. What is wildlife management? And why is Aldo Leopold important to wildlife management? And so the concept of this is that the kids would have journals that they would be writing in while they're reading through this and doing that. But you can see there are different types of questions. And again, once they're done with that, they can click back and they can be brought back to the main map. So as they scroll through this, they're done with the introduction and they're ready to go on. They continue to move on. Now I'm in the next section. You can see it's already moved them now. This is talking about Leopold's time in Arizona. This section and the next one, which is Leopold's time in New Mexico, are the only two that are really written in chronological order. It's basically just talking about them, and that's the focus is on these blue dots. Okay, so as we go through here, they can read. You can see I've embedded pictures in there as well, so they get some more primary source documents that are embedded in here. And then they'll show me, again, dotted lines underlined. It'll click on it. It'll move them to something related to that. In this case, it's the newly formed Apache National Forest. This is the actual proclamation in 1909 of the Apache Forest being created. So I've just embedded some supplemental material, not directly related to what they need to be talking about. Now, they don't need to understand that, but if you wanted to show them primary source documents, I've embedded those in there. I've also, some of these directly relate to some of the points. So as they're reading through here and they click on it, it brings them to that location. So it's talking about Holbrook, it brings them to where Holbrook is. Then it's talking about Springerville, takes them to Springerville and talks about those locations. So again, it's an interactive map that's going to provide all this type of information. So they can scroll through. There's lots to read through here. Then it brings them to the next section, which is, again, Leopold's time in New Mexico, which just continues on with some of the stuff. Again, lots of pictures that are put in here. And then it goes through the other layers that we've talked about. So once we get to the next section, Leopold fights for game protection. Now you can see this brought up the red dots. And it's going to talk about all of that information. So now they can go through here. It starts to introduce some of the other people, like William T. Hornaday, and a book that was very influential on Leopold, which is called Our Vanishing Wildlife. Again, Leopold is doing all of this right around the time that was bad for wildlife management in the United States. This is when we were seeing the extinction of the Carolina parakeet. We were seeing the extinction of the great auk. We were seeing the extinction of the passenger pigeon. And so he was seeing this. William T. Hornaday was writing about it, and it was influencing Leopold. So all this stuff is being told throughout here. And as they go through again, there's an opportunity for a question. So there's a question for this section. So Leopold believed that protecting game populations would increase the value of the national forest. Why do you think this policy would do that? So it allows them to think about this. Why would having wildlife and increasing game in the national forest increase their value? So the kids can start thinking about this and engaging with it. But again, if you don't like that question, just don't have your kids answer it. And you can move through here. I'm not going to go through all of this. You will have the time. This is still somewhat in draft form. I'm still making some corrections to this. The great thing about this is because it's online and it's completely interactive in this way, when I make a change, you will see it. And obviously you'll want to refresh your website periodically if I've made any changes, but if I've cleaned up things or if I've added sections to it or if I've changed the map a little bit, it will all be updated on yours as well. But the concepts will be the same. I may just tweak some things periodically. This is the predator management. Again, of course, I show a picture of the wolf, but now it's highlighting the black dots around here and some key points in there. Again, my role here isn't to go through this history with you. You can read all this stuff. I'm simply introducing the tool for you. There is opportunities here for passages, and then they can respond to the passages. Later on, there are opportunities where you can introduce additional essays for them, and they can read those essays and tie them in with what they're reading here, depending on what you want to get involved. So here are some of the people that influenced him and some of the things that he was seeing when he was talking about predator management. Again, here's another example of a question that's just sort of embedded in there. So he has a hypothesis that's in that sort of passage that you see, and they're asked to summarize it. Okay, what was he actually saying? Goes through all this different type of stuff. Now it has his ideas about erosion and fire. Again, the map changes to tie in specifically with the section. You go through it, continue to go through it. I'm just going to go through this very quickly. His concept of wilderness, influenced by Muir, who was alive at the same time as Leopold. Going through a lot of the stuff, ties in with Roosevelt. All sorts of different things that you're going to see. And this one is one that has a lot of essays that he can explore in more detail, or that your students can explore in more detail. And then the final section that would be in here is the special encounters with wildlife. One of those purple dots, the one on the lower left, is the one where we believe Leopold actually shot the wolf, but it talks about that. The other one is at Escadilla Mountain and the impact of Escadilla Mountain, and talks about these special, unique encounters that Leopold had. And you can see at the top of this one, thinking like a mountain, so it introduces them to the essay that I've already introduced you to. And you can have your students read that essay and then engage in here. And then the last section is just a conclusion, which talks about what Leopold did when he left here. He didn't spend a lot of time in the Southwest, but it was highly influential, but just talks about what happened to Leopold after he left. And then it goes through there, it ties in some stuff with Arizona a little bit more, and then there's a references section and an opportunity to access more information about Leopold and all sorts of stuff. That's the tool that is available to you. Now, there are different things you can do as you explore this tool. You'll see that there are these share buttons. You can actually share specific sections. So if you maintain your own class website, you could put a link to a specific section. So not just to this whole thing, but okay, I just want you today to focus on erosion. And so you can send that link or put that link on the website, and it'll bring the kids directly to that section of the article for them to read and go through. So you can engage them in different ways. You could have different student groups working on different sections and then reporting out. It's just a tool that introduces, it consolidates a lot of resources that are out there into this one single tool and allows people to interact with them. So where do you get it? As I mentioned, it's available for free and does not require any special downloads or programs. That's where the direct link. You can remember it had this big funky long URL. I've simplified it down into tiny.cc/LeopoldSW, stands for Leopold in the Southwest. If you put that in, you'll bring up the map that I showed you, and you can interact with it all you want. Okay, so that's your opportunity to go ahead and do that. Again, there are some errors that I'm going to have to go back and fix. I've had some people look at it. I just haven't had a chance to completely update it, but it is usable. It's still usable for your purposes. There is my contact information. Email is the easiest way. That's why I didn't really include my phone number on here, but you can email me with information or questions. And then obviously our website for our education program, which you will also see links to the Leopold thing. So if you do lose the link to the story map, you can do that as well. You can just go to our education page and get that. Thank you.